As we've developed our curriculum, we were always trying to come up with these dynamic Friday classes. And we realized while we were doing that, there's always people at different periods of their sales cycle, whether they're just starting with us, whether they're, doing one deal every couple of years, but they're working somewhere else, or maybe they just want to get charged and replugged back in. And so we found, as we were always trying to come up with themes of classes, the foundations kind of started to get overlooked, and that's where the questions really lied. So we just try to make Fridays about teaching some of the most basic and common tools that we use. So if you get that Friday night out of nowhere call that I need to write something up, you're not looking blind. And so what I want to share, I'm going to share my screen. And so I'm going to tell you, it's just some really basic tools. And if you already know this, great. If you've forgotten them, great. And if you don't know, now we can learn. So if you ever have a question about a form and, you just want to kind of do some quick research and not call somebody, or if you want to be more specific about your calls and you want to, the great place that I always start is I just go into Express Forms. So you just open that up and you can see they have all the forms here, which is great. And they go in order from 1 down to our higher numbers, but they go in order and they're usually they're in sections. So all the contingencies are together, all the purchase and sales are together, all the listing works together. If you know what form you're looking for, you can certainly just type it right here, either the form number directly or the topic. As you can see, if I do that, I come in and I look up by topic a lot of the times, and I'll just read through these forms. What I really love is most of the time, so the form will be to the left. Now, this is not in obviously Authentisign, so I don't draft my stuff here. But if I just need a good reference, or for today's purpose, when we're going to look at a form together, this is where I'll open it up from. But there's also a manual right next to it. And so it'll explain a lot of the pertinent details. And so that's kind of what we're going to look at today. So let's see here. So you can't see this, but Zoom puts this toolbar right above my links. Can you guys still see the screen?
I can see the forms.
Okay, so I moved the toolbar. I want to make sure. So, so what we'll do is we'll click on Form 21, which I already have done here, but we'll also just kind of look at the addenda, so this is the manual to it, and it explains things in complete detail. And let's just look at the general comments. So things that you should know going into writing this is, first off, use the correct form. So if you're opening up a Form 21, that's for an actual single family residence. But if it's a condominium, it's going to be the same. It's still a purchase and sale, but it's Form 28. Vacant lot or land is number 25. So you can actually find most of the information just by slowing down and looking. Here's what's important. It tells us that we have to fill it out completely. If we fail to leave something that's a material blank, then it might be a voided contract right from the very get. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention and checking every boxes. Also, what's checked and what's not checked is what's going to be reflected on the terms of the contract. I had an example where I got going really quick. I didn't double check, and I ended up not checking the refrigerator, even though it was included in the listing. Well, the sellers decided to move out with the refrigerator. And so I got a call the day of, there's no refrigerator in the house. I looked at the contract. I forgot to check it. I looked at the listing input. It said it was going with it. But what do you think held as truth? Not what they put in the listing remarks, because we were already past the verification period. So what trumped was the fact that I didn't check it. So they were not responsible to leave it, even though in the listing remarks it said it. So we really got to slow down. That was with lots of experience. I still made that mistake. So I got to buy a refrigerator. Technically the client sold it or signed off on it, but I'm the one that's leading to it. And if it goes to court, it's going to be held up that, hey, Joe, you just had them sign kind of blindly and you didn't point that out. It was clearly listed. They thought they were getting it. So it was really a non-decision for me. I knew that I needed to get that refrigerator. So all that to say is make sure you slow down, check the boxes, double check what the listing input sheet is, and make sure you know what you're sending out. So here's an important thing. Remember that these forms are written and drafted by legal teams. And so basically they are legal binding. And so we're practicing limited law as long as we stay in the context of this. So we don't add or change verbiage. If we do, we're kind of practicing law and we're not licensed to do so. So we're protected by the terms in the boilerplate, as long as we stay in those lines. And again, one of the things that happens is unless you waive it, which when we get into competitive situations, they will ask us to waive certain things. But then once you go into contract, there's a 10-day verification period where the buyer can actually verify everything that's in the listing input and make sure that it's true to the house. If there are material defects in that, they have the right to rescind their offer and back out. How are we? Are we good so far?
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's important stuff to know. And again, if you have questions, it's going to tell you exactly how to fill in these blanks. And so, oh, sorry, let me mute my phone. I thought it already was. So I always like to skim these over and just kind of look. It tells you really great stuff because, you know, and I'm the first to admit I would just used to call my designated broker and he'd say, "Did you read the form?" And so right here, it tells us that the real estate day ends at 9 o'clock. It also tells us that unless we specify an offer, does anybody know how long an offer is before it expires if you don't specify an expiration period? It's
2 days, right?
2 days.
2 days, yep. And so all this is spelled out here, which is great. If we ever get in a bind and we just forget, all this stuff is spelled out here. So let's look at how we fill out these purchases and sales and what needs to be there. So obviously we're going to put the date. But if we read here, they're telling us that that date's not really that important. It's a reference date. The most important date is when we find mutual acceptance. And mutual acceptance is not just when everybody's signed, but when there's been delivery. So if all parties sign and agree on terms as laid out, we're not in mutual acceptance just because it's signed. We have to deliver it. And so one of the things that I've seen happen over the last few months is people get really excited. They're talking to the agent that's listing the property when they're representing a buyer, and they just email that agent. That's great. But what if that agent's out to lunch, or, you know, I've seen offers come into my spam, so I don't even know they're there. So have I really had delivery? The answer would be no. I mean, it would be, we would have to show that we sent it, but he never acknowledged it. And so one thing that we always need to do is there's what's called the firm address, email address. And so when we're submitting an offer, we always want to send it to the firm email address. You're going to get an automatic receipt of submitting, and that's going to timestamp delivery. So if we submit it, if I submit an offer at 9:05 today and it goes there and I get it timestamped, but Jason sends it there and it was at 9:03, really his offer got in first. So that would be the offer that would be the winning and mutually accepted offer because he can prove that it was confirmed delivery. So those are the things that are important. And so when the title of the class is how to deliver a winning purchase and sale. And so what that to me says is a winning purchase and sale is one that's legally binding, spells out the terms clearly, and has it filled out properly. And that's going to be a winning purchase and sale. That's different than a winning offer. There's winning offers too. And so for this sake, we're just going to keep it very simple. We're going to look at making an offer on a home, and it's going to not have a lot of competition. We're just going to look at how to write the actual purchase and sale. Now, when we get into a situation where we want to submit an offer, call me on those. The way we fill this out might be entirely different. The way we use contingencies might be entirely different. So that's always going to be a case by case. And that's all going to start as we gather information in the fact-finding process before putting in an offer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the date. What's today's date? Is the 21st. So we'll put in the date. One thing it says in the boilerplate that we do not have to put in is the MLS number if it's not available. And so this question just came up today. I had an agent that wanted to know about how to write an off-market deal, one that's not listed in the MLS. Do we need special forms? The answer is no. We're going to use the same purchase and sale, but obviously it's not listed. I shouldn't say obviously. It's not listed, so there has not been an MLS number generated. So we would leave that one blank. And again, when it comes to offer expiration date, if we leave this blank, it's going to default to 2 days. Oftentimes I'll write my offers for the day of because I want an answer today, and then I submit it and let the agent know. But that's another class. That's how to effectively submit an offer, a winning offer. that's where timelines come in. So for today, we'll just put an expiration date of 2/23. It's an estate. We want to give them plenty of time. There's no competition. I'm not going to usually ever tell you to write an offer up this way. It's usually a very competitive situation, so we have to be strategic in how. But for today's purpose, I just want to go through filling it out.
Maybe 4/23.
Oh, yeah, 2/23 is not where I'm still back in February.
Not that it matters. I know what you meant, but just
No, well, then we'd have an ineffective. That's awesome. I'm glad to know you're with me. So let's see. What's a good buyer name? Donna, you're going to be buying this house, okay?
okay. ROMESBURG.
All right. And are you buying this together or are you buying this with somebody?
I'm buying it with my husband,
Okay, so we're going to buy it married together. So what's your husband's name?
Justin.
Justin. All right, so they're buying it. And so we want to, and the reason why we're going to put the status is we want to know how it's going to take title. So they're buying it as a married couple. Sometimes they're buying it married as separate property. You'll see that sometimes, not very often, but so you always want to clarify. And the way that I would ask this is, how would you guys like to take title? Are you taking title together? And then they'll say, yeah. And so I know they're a married couple, but they could be single buying it together. But this is where title wants to know. Again, I used to get so stressed out about this and like I didn't know the right ways to ask those questions. We have a lot of good resources. If it makes it to escrow, they're going to ask and we can clean some of this up, but it's always good to have all the information up front first so we don't have to go back and forth or create any places where somebody could get out. For example, earnest money, and we'll get to that when we get there. So we're going to say the seller is Jason. Now we're going to say McKinsey is selling this property to you. Make sure I can spell the name right. I go with the McKinsey selling this property. And so if we don't have one of the things is we're always going to attach the legal description. So when we submit an offer, you always want to check, does everybody know where to look in the supplements for these things?
I know where they are.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question just about that?
Oh, please.
Like if you in transaction desk, if you have everything autofill, I know it'll autofill that in, but have you ever run into instances where it's not the same? I know you're supposed to double check and.
I have not.
Okay.
You're talking about the legal description?
Yeah, like the parcel number. Yeah.
And so if you read that's a great question. So in here, it actually explains that stuff. And so that's why we want to, it says don't get the legal description from the county. That's why we have title pull it and they're going to verify everything. And so that's going to fall under the verification period also. They're not going to close on a home with blemish title. It also in there, it explains that if there's liens and stuff that has to be paid by buyer before closing and unless otherwise spelled out. And so that's why we attach it. Another thing, so let's say there's no legal description, but we submit the offer and then they give us legal description in 2 days and we sign off that it's okay and we attach it to the purchase and sale. In that incidence, we still have mutual acceptance the day that everybody agreed, not the day that they attached it. And so the timeline will start. So if today we accept an offer, our offer gets accepted, but it's not until Monday that we actually get the legal description, and we attach it. Day one is Monday. It's not Tuesday. It'll be day one. So that's going to be the day they go off when it comes to legal description. So perfect. And so if we're looking, I should have pulled up a listing and we could have just played it, but let's just say, it's a normal listing. So you're going to get the stove, the refrigerator. Always check and see if the washer and dryer is included. And sometimes they will not spell it out that they're including it, but your buyer wants it. We're not competitive. So I have checked it anyways. And then the agent will either omit it or tell me, hey, we weren't including it. Is that detrimental? And if I say yes, then it becomes a term that we're negotiating upon. So we're going to say that this house is $775,000. Oh, I should put the address. Sorry. So we do need the full address. So we'll put 123 Main Street.
Hey, Joe, quick question too. I've run into this a couple times where when you do, auto populate from transaction desk,
Yeah.
it'll say like 123 Main Street and it's supposed to be Edmonds, but it'll say like Shoreline or Seattle. Like that happens sometimes. So just be aware to always double check the address.
Yeah, and oftentimes they'll auto-populate with the correct one because they've made some boundary changes or stuff, or they'll add the full zip code. So I'll usually check that one and put it in because that's coming right from the county. Again, what's gonna hold though is what's spelled out on the legal description, and that's why we do include the legal description. All right, so we're gonna have a refrigerator, we're gonna have the washer and dryer, the dishwasher, and you know what? There's a hot tub, but we don't want that hot tub. Well, we'll just keep that. That's a whole nother class. So we're buying that for $775,000. So one of the things that happens, and this comes up a lot, is earnest money. What is earnest money? How much earnest money do we give? And so there's not, I've heard a million formulas, like you want it to be at least 1% of the purchase price. Honestly, we've been in such a competitive market. The conversation I've had mainly is, earnest money is going to be applied to your down payment, closing costs, and prepaids. So we're going to be very calculated. Like I'm comfortable letting them know that, if we're in a situation where it's compromised, you'll have warning, and we'll explain all the risks. But I tell them, let's go ahead and put 50,000. I've had 100,000. We've had 200,000. But then I've also sometimes it's know your buyer, know the house they're buying, and know what's appropriate. If it's a first-time home buyer on a FHA loan, and you go to them and tell them we need $50,000 down, that's going to be more than their down payment. It might scare them off. So just kind of be sensitive around it. It's not. I don't think it's scary to put up large earnest money as long as we have clear discussions around it, but just know we always do need earnest money. And so oftentimes you'll see it as low as $5,000, and it's a first-time home buyer on a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, and that's totally appropriate. It just kind of, this is where this would go into how to deliver a competing offer. This is where we look at all the pieces of the puzzle, the competition on the subject property, and we'll craft it based off of the buyer's capabilities and what the demand on that unit is. So that would be a different discussion. But for now, we'll just go ahead and put $50,000 down. That's not an uncommon amount to see on somebody buying not 500,000. But again, this you need to have this. There has to be material attachment to it when we're submitting these offers. So you can do $1, but it's not going to get looked at most likely. And so what we do, because we, as a policy, we don't handle earnest money personally on the way I do business. So I know that when we get into that, there's a lot of rules around handling it. And so what I've done now is I've stepped out of it, because when I do not handle the earnest money, I don't need to get a Form 89. I have the clients immediately connected with escrow, and so they can make arrangements. I always check this other, and I put check or wire, so they have the option, because oftentimes they don't know how they want to do it. Are they liquidating funds? All of this stuff. So if we don't check here the delivery date, but we still need to put it in here, just always put a number in here. It will default to 2 days, but we still want to put 2 days in there, so we're acknowledging it. Now, the thing about earnest money is, so let's say Donna's out on vacation. She thinks she's going to give the earnest money to McKinsey on Tuesday, which is when it would be required if we accepted today, but she's on vacation, doesn't get back till Wednesday. She decides to deliver it on Thursday. What happens between Tuesday and Thursday? Who's at risk? What are the risks? Does anybody know? Technically, Donna's in breach. Oh, go ahead, Donna.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna say that I haven't fulfilled my side of my obligation in the contract.
So if Jim comes in with a better offer, what happens? Is Donna protected? Exactly not. Jim can come in because now you haven't, and so your offer is voidable. Now let's say nobody comes in with another offer, same scenario. Donna gets her coffee, gets the check delivered on Thursday because she thinks it's no big deal. What happens? Are they in contract or not?
Not until he gets something signed that says the earnest money was late.
You don't actually, technically, you don't even have to do that. Once they've acknowledged receipt of it, we're in mutual again.
Oh, okay.
It's always good to have that. I'm a big believer of paper trail, paper trail, paper trail. In that case, I would have escrow. I would send out an addendum just saying that it's been received and acknowledged. But technically, they can. It's a voidable contract, meaning that the seller has the right to terminate. They're not obligated to.
Not to get in
Joe,
the
just
weeds
we
here.
we learned on legal lunch yesterday. That's what we call cured the breach.
There you go.
Legalese. So there's
So
my
you
2 cents.
also, yeah, is it cured the breach? I was trying to watch it in the class in the Mukoteo, but we got so much good dialogue. I got pieces of that class, but there's a lot of good information of what's coming on. That's just a plug for the legal lunches. If you see them, they're giving up good information. We have changes coming to the industry. It's good to stay ahead. Okay, so what we have to do now is we have to instruct what happens to that earnest money. Who's going to hold it? We always have the closing agent hold it. We don't want to be responsible. If we do, we have to have a whole accounting, and we're not set up to do that. So firms these days do not take the money. It goes directly to escrow. So the check would be made out to the escrow company that's going to hold it. In the event that it did get delivered to the office, then we have to make contact with escrow, and they'll send a courier. We get a Form 89. And so it's a much easier, streamlined process now. They can hop on and do it digitally. They can send a courier directly to the house. So if you get the objection, like my clients are old, they don't want to deal with this, say that's great. We'll have a courier come pick it up right from their house. A lot of people don't know that escrow will do that for you. But yeah, it's funny because I hear all these objections, but I have the same objections. I work now. It seems like most of my clients are my friends, aging parents that don't want to use a computer, and so escrow has been really great in that. They actually, if you let your closer know hey, this is a real hands-on situation. Closers are great at working with people, so we have all the tools to meet our clients where they're at and eliminate risk from us. Okay, so. Always check forfeiture of earnest money. I can't think of a situation where you put seller's election of remedies. And if you read through the form on it, the tutorial on it, it tells you that, you know, by checking this, you're opening yourself up to all sorts of stuff. They can come after you for damages. So let's say, how would this be applied? That $50,000, same situation. Donna decides 2 days. Now, all these people have wanted to submit backup offers, but we're so committed to Donna that we're not even looking at them. 2 days before close, Donna's like, I don't want this house anymore. I'm going to go move across the country. You know, things like this happen. So that money is now at risk. If we have checked that it's going to forfeiture of earnest money, the only thing that McKinsey has claim to is that earnest money. McKinsey can say, well, man, I missed the hot market. Now it's in a spiral. There would have been multiple offers. I probably would have got hundreds of thousands of more dollars if I just kept it on the market and didn't try to work with Donna. Well, that's too bad, McKinsey. Sorry, we've checked this. You've signed off on it. All that you have access to is the earnest money. And even at that, then Donna's probably going to fight for it. And so there's going to be a whole discrepancy. So oftentimes we'll find both parties come to an agreement of some sorts. But the most that is at risk is the earnest money. So when we're getting in well, honestly, I look at earnest money. I don't care if it's a $5,000 earnest money or a $50,000 earnest money, it holds the same value to the buyer. And we have to know that. Like, one of the things that's really important to know is that when you're dealing with people, no matter what the money level is, they're comfortable or uncomfortable just the same. And so we need to be respectful. You know, if you're selling a $4 million house, but you've never lived in one, that's okay. Don't let your fear of it impede on the experience. You show up with the same professionalism. If you're helping somebody buy a mobile home for $80,000 and you've taken them on as a client, you have the same fiduciary responsibility, and the loss of that $5,000 is just as impacting. So we don't want to minimize it because it's a smaller amount. We want to handle it all with the same care and concern. So just know that when you're treating people, that's an obligation that we have. All right. And so title insurance company, usually in the agreement, it's listed out. I don't have a reason why you wouldn't use the title that's already opened. It's paid for by the seller. If we were to switch it, the cost could be incurred by your buyer. And so typically there's not really an advantage. And if you're working with an agent that's got a good relationship with a closer, that's probably why they're directing it there. And the closer is going to just be a really helpful advocate in this situation. I have seen reasons like the buyer works for a different title company and they get special pricing, or they just want a certain team to handle it, or an investor's done so much business. So there are times where you'll be asked to redirect escrow, but that's nothing to really think about. That's something that just comes up so little. So these people, they've asked us to use Chicago title. So we'll put the title and escrow, and then the closing agent, again, you put the company. And then if you have somebody that you're working with there, you put it there. If not, no big deal. They'll set you up with the closer there. So another thing that's really important is to know your closing date. And so when we get to submitting an offer, closing date comes into hand as far as how we write the offer. If we want to be competitive, sometimes that means we're doing an extended close because the seller needs time. Sometimes we're going to do a rapid close because the seller needs the money. But again, if we're in a competitive situation, we're always going to probably have a lot of communication with the listing agent on closing times, and figure out what works best. So if you're representing a buyer, what you should know is what's the ability, what is the need of your buyer, obviously, what's the flexibility, what's the give, like, are they in a place that they've paid through for 6 months, so they really don't need to close? So can you work with an extended close? It's just good to have this in your mind as we craft up offers. But the most important is if it's a finance deal, or if it's contingent on of unsecured funds at the time, like maybe they're liquidating stocks or whatever, you want to make sure that your closing date is achievable. So if you put a 5-day close, but your lender's like, oh man, I can't close for 30 days, you've created a real problem. And so always check with your lender. If it's a finance deal, ask, hey, how quick can you close? And then, and just make sure that you're going to work with them on that. So that's a real big deal. So that's where you get your closing date typically. Sometimes people need certain closing dates for certain events. So just talk to the parties. In this case, we'll just do your standard 30-day close. So we're going to close on 5/23, not 3/23. And the possession date. So sometimes, and you're going to, I would say 95% of the time, possession's on closing, meaning they get the keys on closing. So I'll ask you kind of just an obscure question, but let's say, okay, we're going to close on 5/23. And all of a sudden you get recording numbers at 3:30. Does the buyer now have the right to occupy the home at 3:31 because now the title is transferred and we got recording numbers? Does that mean that they No? Does anybody think differently?
Yeah, I always think 9 o'clock. Like they get the keys at 9 o'clock unless otherwise worked out.
Yeah. And so the letter of the law is at 9 o'clock is when the real estate day ends. And so that's when you technically can take ownership of the home. Now, 99.9% of the time, you're not going to run into that. But do know where it's going to happen oftentimes, where I've seen it the most is, well, just poor planning. So usually a distress situation, or oftentimes if it's like a relocation situation and they're dependent on the company hiring movers, the movers don't get there till that day. And so they can't even get out of there. And so we need to be aware of this. If that's the situation, set the expectations right. Be like, hey, man, they're just getting out of there. They look like pretty clean people, but obviously it's not going to be cleaned. I like to kind of anticipate whatever thing could come up to diffuse them before it happens. Because if I'm thinking that I'm going to get the keys at 3:31 and it's going to be spotless, and all of a sudden I can't even get in till 9 o'clock and they didn't even have a chance to mop down the floors, I might be pretty disappointed when I first walk in. If I know that, hey, these guys are rushing to get out of town, we're probably not going to get cleaned, maybe I'm going to take the lead and say, hey, I've got a cleaner coming for you Saturday. In fact, I just did that on a closing I had last month. I had a cleaner come in before the lady was able, because it was a for sale by owner and it was just kind of grimy. And I wanted that experience. So just kind of know what your buyers are going to walk into. And, as you get to know your buyers, know their experience. If it's their 6th home that they're buying, they're probably pretty savvy. If it's their very first time, kind of know how to set that stage and what they should expect. So it's a good news for them. So if they walk in knowing they're just out of there and it's not going to be clean, but you have a cleaner, that's a great closing gift. That's a great way to show that, hey, I'm anticipating what's to come and I'm ahead of you. So it's just opportunities to just give that little white glove service also, if we set the expectations correctly.
If you, so say, just another example, like if it's the home's vacant, and you know, like most likely they're gonna call you at 3 or 4 or whatever, and it's gonna be recorded. Can you can you check other input at recording so that they can have the keys before 9 PM, or
You know,
is that not a great idea?
I don't know if you can actually. That's actually a question that's never came up. I mean, I think anything is fine if you put it in writing. However, I think what I would do though is I start the conversation with the listing agent going into it, like, hey, are they gonna have any troubles getting out? Do you see any challenges? And you'll know when you do your walkthrough a couple days before, kind of the situation. So if I were to do a walkthrough and realize like they haven't packed one thing, I'm probably going to be preemptive, and I'm going to call the listing agent and say, hey, you know, I'm sure you're so. Always give the bit. For me, I've learned I can fly off the handle, and I'm going to be met with that same resistance, or I can just give them the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, you know, we'll say that Jason's the listing agent since Mackenzie's the seller and you're the buyer. We'll get everyone involved. You know, I'd call Jason and say, hey, you know, we just did our walkthrough. Looks great. Looks like your sellers are really working hard, but there's still a lot of stuff. Do you foresee any problems with them getting out on time? You know, and Jason will say at that point, I'm going to hear anything like, oh man, yeah, I've been working on them. And now I can, holy crap, we have a whole different problem we've got to start working on. Or, yeah, they're going to be out. They've got the movers coming tomorrow and I've got a cleaner coming in. So I usually find that if I just handle it that way, I can have the plan and set the stage appropriately. And it's of my belief that the more engagement I have with the listing agent and I can have more dialogue, that's going to create a relationship that's going to pay dividends for a long time. The world really is small. We're going to see some of the same agents if we're looking in the same areas. And so any opportunity I have to show gratitude and a cooperativeness, I just take full advantage of that. So that's how I would handle it. But if there's an immediate need, I would start talking about that early in the process and get something in writing then. Does that answer that? I know it's not completely direct, but there's not really a direct answer on that either.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just sometimes, you know, you get the keys and you're so excited to give them away, but I'm like, gosh, 9 PM. How am I going to wait till 9? But
Yeah, it is hard.
yeah.
In that case, start thinking of how you're going to deliver it. We have a whole formula on how we deliver our keys now. But you know what? That happened on our team just about 2 weeks ago. They showed up and the sellers were still there. And he had the buyer there all excited with balloons. And so he had to like pivot on the fly. And luckily, if we deliver good service through the whole process, even when these things come up, they create, if anything, a moment of humor.
Yeah.
Yes, it was disappointing and she would have loved to have it, but she was like, oh man, yeah, okay, no problem. And let's go grab a coffee and we'll come back. So I look at problems as an opportunity to meet up with service and find a solution too. So oftentimes I try to capitalize on those to strengthen relationships.
Yeah.
So perfect. So we're going to on closing there. So again, services closing by agent for payment of utilities requested. So again, I don't know why you'd waive it unless you're just representing a builder and they don't care. Their whole plan is just to click, demo it. But I would still want to know who the utilities are. Now, what you're going to find more often than not, it's going to be signed by the seller and it's not going to be filled out and it's going to be an additional supplements. I've still include it. I have them sign it and escrow will gather that information. So at closing, they'll have all the utilities. If it is filled out, that's great. If you want to save phone calls from escrow to your seller on a listing side and to yourself, go ahead and fill it out up front. I mean, most people know who picks up their garbage. Most people know who they pay their PUD to. So that's all it is just spelling out who utilities are paid to. So here's one that's important, line 13. Charges, assessments levied before, but due after closing. Who's going to pay that? So if this property has charges against it and it sells, who's going to pay it? We need that spelled out. And that could be utility liens, contractor liens, all of that. So by default, what I check is I always check prepaid in full by seller at closing, because 90% of the time that's going to come up. And I check it because I want you to tell me if there's a charge. And what you're going to get sometimes is it's called the King County Sewer Capacity Charge. That's the name. It will come up also in Snohomish under the name King County Sewer Capacity Charge. And that's usually actually conveyed with the property and charged like a utility. And so it's a flat amount, and you're going to see anywhere from probably $4,000 to $14,000, depending on when it was built and how much has been paid. But it gets paid quarterly like a utility bill. And so if you have a agent call and tell you, well, there's the sewer capacity charge, that's normal. So that then in that point, they're going to cross this off and they're going to check assumed by buyer. For me, because I like to double cross everything, I'm still going to write on a 34, which is a blank general addendum, or on the optional clauses in the blank space, I'm going to specify that the buyer is that the sewer capacity charge conveys with the property and it to be assumed by the buyer at closing. So I would still spell that out. So we're still mitigating what we're going to be. But this basically protects you from absorbing any liens that are against it. Also, what could come up on that when you check it is if it's in a HOA and all of a sudden that they're going to have an assessment, or they do have an active assessment. That's one that you might have to do some negotiation around, and they'll want you to pay that. And so again, you might have to come to general terms on a different addendum. But we're not talking about addendums today, but just know that that's what it's stating. And so when we get into these, there are addendums that'll be specific, and we can talk about those as situations occur. Does that, any questions on that? All right. Seller citizenship of FERPTA. So again, it's odd this is one of those ones that is kind of ambiguous. Like, we have to fill this out, but we really don't know the status of somebody. But basically this is to make sure that taxes are paid appropriately if seller's not U.S. citizen. And why it's important is we can be liable as agents if we don't spell it out. And so again, I always am going to check is not seller is not a foreign person for purposes of U.S. income taxation if they don't specify it on the FERPTA uploaded. So then if the listing agent gets this offer, they might also check this back, or you can actually talk to the listing agent. You know, it's best to find these out directly so you don't have to make changes. Anytime we make a change, even if it's just changing one box, we go from being into a mutually accepted contract to a counter situation. So even small things like the dishwasher, if I check the dishwasher but it's not supposed to be, and we have to change that, now we're in a counter situation. And why that's important, if it's competitive, somebody can come in. So if all we're waiting on is an initial from Donna to say that she's okay with not getting the washer, but now Chris has an offer that comes in that's way better, or even starts the dialogue, like I'm going to, as a listing agent, say, hey, you know, we're actually just about to send a counter over. If you can get that to me right now, we have a really strong offer. You know, it exceeded our expectations. I can plant those seeds. Now, all of a sudden, Chris submits an offer that's 20 grand higher with no contingencies. So I'm going to sign that, and I'm going to not send you the counter. I'm going to send you a rescission of the counter. So it's just really important that if these little small details that we can clean them up by a discussion with the listing agent. I can't stress enough that how to write an effective and winning purchase and sale starts with dialogue from the information you gather from the listing agent, bouncing it off of us if you're not experienced in these situations. But that's really the critical is gathering information. The cleaner we write it, the less back and forth we go, the quicker we get into mutual, and we have what's called site control. Once we're in mutual acceptance, our buyer has site control. So no matter what the contingencies are, they can't take it away if somebody comes and gives a double cash offer. We have site control, and that's really where we're trying to get to. And then we can look at our contingencies and figure out how we move forward.
So I just real quick, I totally agree with you about the communication and dialogue. If it's pretty clear, you know, we haven't actually had the conversation about FERPTA. FERPTA is not uploaded in the supplements. You're saying you would just fill it in as assumed they are U.S. citizens.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, but that's where we get into gray area. If I make an assumption because I've read a name and I make an assumption based off of that, then I can be in trouble. So just know that it's something that could be a point of counter. But yeah, if it's late at night, I can't get a hold of that agent, I'm not going to not submit that offer, and I'm going to make my best guess. Now, I would always check in the supplements. Sometimes they'll have it up there and it will show that they are a foreign citizen. And so now I know how to fill that out. But it's all for taxation. And I used to not check it and I've found out I have to. So we need to address it. We have to leave everything on there. Okay. Agency disclosure. Now this is important too. And this is where we really delineate, you know, am I working with you as your buyer's broker or am I working with you as the buying and the listing broker? Now, that being said, if we are working as a dual agent, you have to have both a listing agreement and a buyer's agreement. In a case of dual agency, they need to sign both a buyer's contract to protect you. So just know that. For me, I've worked as I've represented the listing agent and I've written it up for the buyer. So I've treated them as a customer, not a client, but that's a gray area. So I'm not, you know, it's not a best practice. I'm just saying there is a difference between dual agency and just writing it up. However, if we go to court and we've helped facilitate signing of the contract, they're gonna hold our feet to the fire, regardless of what I verbalize. So everything needs to be in writing. So in this case, I am representing the buyer. I'm representing Donna on vacation. So we've done all this remotely. We got the listing broker is representing the listing side. So we always want to put that. Now, here's the thing too. This is what needs to happen. So if you start, so as they're making changes, and just to give you a preview of what's to come, as of January 1st, and don't worry, this is nothing to worry about now. It's just to put in there. We're going to have dialogue as we get more info. But as of January 1st, we are going to be mandated when representing a buyer to have a buyer agreement. So know that's coming. And know that this is really to have complete transparency. All these laws, as much as they change the way we work and they sound frustrating and everybody's attacking me, it's not true. It's really trying to protect us so we have full transparency of what we do. And so are we going to need to learn different talking points as we implement new tools that we have been taught that it's something that's optional? We definitely will. So don't worry. We're going to be on top of that, learning that. But for now, I want you to know what you need to do is when we check this is a newer. So if you've been around for a few years, you'll know that this has maybe been added, in the last 6 months? Time is pretty relative to me right now. But we want to check that, are we getting paid a dollar amount or a percentage of commission amount? And pay as offered or see addendum. So what happened this week that came up in one of a transaction is an agent was representing a buyer, but they wanted to use part of their commission to credit to the seller to bring the deal together. However, they did not want their buyer to know. And so all they were putting in here was a different amount. They weren't putting, but what was being offered was a 3% commission, I believe. But they were taking a less. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to default to what's printed in the listing. So the 3% commission and nothing else is going to be applied anywhere. We need explicit direction. So in this case, you would write see addendum. And on that, you would spell out that the agent is crediting to such and such on a form 41 on the commission disbursement, or you would actually, probably if you really want to get around and it's just a surprise and never know, you would actually do paid as agreed. And then on the commission disbursement, you would direct escrow where your commission's going to. But it's got to be spelled out if you have any other intention than what's put out. So it's best practice to always say pay as offered. But you cannot ignore this box. And then when we get to section 17, what I like, this is for me, it's kind of a fail safe. Like this is where I get to recap the deal. I'm like, okay, that's right. Donna's doing a financing deal. She's putting her 20% down. So I know. And when you look at it in authentic or transaction desk, you get these drops. Oh, you have it here. So this is kind of my last point of check. So I know it's a finance deal. So we're going to literally spell out what addendums are being included or attached. So one of the questions that come up often is, well, I'm not supplying a 22K. If you don't remember, that's the one that spells out what the utilities are. The sellers are providing it. I'm not providing it. Well, it's still going to be attached to the purchase and sale. So even though you're using the one that's uploaded, you still need to put the 22K here because it is part of the actual purchase and sale. So any addendum that we're going to get into, we're going to put in here. You know, I set for myself a template up that just pops up. It's got a template with the purchase and sale and most of the addendums. the first thing I do is I delete ones I'm not going to use in that transaction and add ones that I'm going to need. And then this is where I just get to do the mental check. Oh yeah, it's on septic. I need a septic addendum. And so we'll look at these addendums one-on-one. That's what Jen's going through right now. But this is where we put all the addendums that we're going to attach to the purchase and sale. And then all this has to be filled out and completed. You need the buyers to sign it. So if Donna and her husband are buying it, but her husband's off skiing and Donna's available to sign, do we need the husband's signature, or is Donna enough? Exactly. All parties to the purchase need to sign in the appropriate fields. So we're going to get both buyers. We're going to put their information. Again, title's going to use this for when they put title in the name, all of that. But we want to know who the broker is, the broker ID, and most of this fills in automatically. But pay attention and make sure it's there. You want the license agent's number, all of that. So if there ever is discrepancy, we have a total story to tell right here. Who's selling to who, who's representing who, what are the terms of the contract. And that's really what the purchase and sale is. It sets up the terms of the contract and how everybody is supposed to, what obligations each party has to fulfill to make the contract come to a successful closing. But that's how to win that's a winning purchase and sale, is we want to make sure that everything is filled out and that the buyers understand the terms in which they're offering and any risks in which they're taking. And so we want to make sure that we don't just skirt around topics about earnest money, the uncomfortable topics. This is where you really learn, set the bar, and also guide your clients on what to expect as they move forward through the process. And again, this is one of the best references you have. Then you also have been watching Jen's classes. She's super, super sharp. You guys are all intelligent. You passed the test. It's really hard to pass. So I know that you have a basic comprehension with reading and writing to be able to pass that test. So if you read through this, you'll be surprised at how much information's there. When I read through it and I talk about it with another agent, how much I actually gain. So don't be scared to call and read through this with me. Chris just did this morning. We read it out loud. We hear it. We talk about the verbiage. And then we ask what it's saying, and it's all spelled out very clearly for you there. So I just want you to know there's a lot of references. When one of the scariest things is when I've just been doing these classes and hanging out, and all of a sudden somebody calls and is like, I want you to write this up right now. And then I pop it up and I haven't seen it in 6 months. So just be very comfortable with it. But anyhow, let's see. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions, feedback? Things I left out?
I don't know. This is probably for a different class, but just say in the terms of this particular purchase and sale that we just wrote up, like the verification period, it's filled in at 10 days. Like back in COVID days or really competitive markets, people change that number. Do you typically always leave it like in a more, I mean, I understand why it's there and I want my buyers to have the 10 days, but do you know what I'm asking?
I do. I waive paragraph W.
Yeah.
I don't typically. However, if I do, I have a very candid conversation with my clients. Don't be scared to have I will literally say things as direct as this. Is this smart? I would say absolutely not. If you want to be competitive, it's what's needed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not scared to talk in that language. I want people to understand. At this point, your earnest money is not protected. I mean, I have very frank conversations. That's why I'm their agent, because I need to be able to speak. And I tell them, if you want to back out because of that, I understand. I'm more interested in you being satisfied and feeling protected than the completion of this sale. So I really use those moments to build some credibility and some trust.
Yeah.